Okay, get the box. So I'm recording today. Hey, I'm an Aleph. On Dalet on base. We didn't get a chance to do the bottom taste, so I wanted to start out with that. The Gemara had said that Rava didn't like one of the drushes in the wide lines of Dalet on base, the first wide line. So Rava changed up what the pasuk means. Ve'eshes ish nefesh yikar tatzud. So Rava says what that means is called abal eshes ish. Somebody who was mezana with an eshes ish. I feel lamad Torah, even if he was a big Talmud Chacham. Nevertheless, he's going to be ensnared and trapped into Gehenna. That is to say, the fact that he has a lot of Torah is not going to save him. So Tesis says, firstly, notices that the Gemara in Chagiga tells us as well that Kalabolish is Nitra min Ha'ilam. He's also going to be lost from the world. Then it says V'ktas Kashem. I don't understand. The Gemara B'Matin and Test says that Abal Eshes Ish Misasta B'Chenek V'yesh Lechelet L'Olam Haba. But the Gemara B'Matin is mashma that somebody who is guilty of having an affair with a married woman, such a person gets a Chelet L'Olam Haba. So you see that it's not correct to say that such a person is going to be permanently in Gehenna. He is going to be able to go to Olam Haba. So Tes answers, what we're talking about is a situation where a person did tshuva. That is our Gemara, which is mashma, that is going to be for Gehenim forever. Or the Gemara in the beginning of Chagiga, that's mashma, is going to be in Gehenim. That's a situation we didn't do tshuva. But if he did do tshuva, then he will eventually go to Chai Olam Haba. It continues and it says, we also look in Yavamas that makes another qualification. It's not simply enough that he did tshuva, but it has to be hechad le'ha'lu mamzer, the bar tshuva. He has to be the situation where he didn't have a mamzer. If he had a child, so then it's going to be that much more difficult to be able to actually do tshuva, or tshuva im yisurin dafka. The tshuva has to be with yisurin. It's not sufficient to just have tshuva. So Tais is making a few qualifications. Number one, if a person was guilty of being Mizanot and Ish, in fact, he would be condemned to Chai Olam in Gehenna. But if a person did tshuva with Yisur and Dafka, and the person didn't have a mamzer, so then he could get to Chai Olam Haba and get out of Gehenna. Tes continues and he says that this is what we see in Sanhedrin, where over there David HaMelech is confronted by those who make fun of him. When say David knew what's the din of somebody who's boiling ish, right? Obviously with the Ma'aseh of Bathsheba, and he would respond and he would say, somebody who's boiling ish is misasa b'chenek v'yesh lechelet goyim haba, but a mevayish pnei chaver b'rabim is ein lechelet goyim haba. So Tes continues, and Tes says that over there in that Gemara, that David accepted upon himself various isurim, in order to, deal with the situation of what it was Bathsheba. So he had a son that died. He had other things that happened to him, all of which were a response to that action that he had taken with the Bathsheba. Yeah. So what I just wanted to point out is the Gemara, but the Mishnah in Eduyas Parak Beis tells us that a person goes to Gehenna for 12 months, and after 12 months they come out. So what do we mean in our Gemara that was saying that a person to then Ladina Shal Gehenna, the Gemara in Chagiga is Nitra min Ha'ilam. It sounds like he's going to be in Gehenna forever if he didn't do tshuva. Don't we say 12 months? So the Gemara Shoshana tells us that Zion on the base, Zion on the Aleph. So the Gemara tells us over there also the same idea about the 12 months. And the Gemara says there that Pesha Yisrael Begufan Yarn Legehenem V'Nidoinim Ba Yud Beis Chodesh. Well, Ach Yud Beis Chodesh Gufan Karlov and Ishmos and Nisrefes Ruach mefazarton tachas karpois raglei tzadikim. So the Gemara tells us in Rosh Hashanah that Peish Yisrael Begufon get punished in Gehenna for 12 months, and after that, whatever is left is sort of destroyed and put underneath the feet of the tzaddikim. Again, whatever these things mean, I'm not sure, but what is clear from the Gemara that Peish Yisrael Begufon are so terrible that they never get out of Gehenna. In other words, it's not just the various people that we mentioned in Sanhedrin, but these people as well. What is the Peish Yisrael Begufon? So the more there explains Rosh Hashanah that it's a kakafta delay monach tefillin. It just explains that it doesn't just mean somebody didn't put on tefillin. It means somebody didn't put on tefillin because he thought it was a waste of time, b'syonis for him to do so. But obviously, if the person was chayshish for gufnaki and was afraid to put on tefillin because he didn't want to act inappropriately with the tefillin, so such a person is not considered Peish Yisrael Begufon. Then the Gemara continues, and the Gemara says that what a Paishe Umaysa Olam Megufan, what is an example of that? The Gemara says those are situations of people who were even arayas. Remember that for Bnei Noach they also have an Isser of arayas. And so, what I'd like to suggest to you is that when the Gemara says Paishe Yisrael Begufan is a kakafta d'loy monach tefillin, it is even a kakafta d'loy monach tefillin. Such a person who refuses to ever put on tefillin is going to be somebody who, after 12 months of Gehenna, is not going to be able to go to Gan Eden, not going to be able to go to Elam Haba because of the fact that he's considered so bad. Afilu or kakafta d'loy monach tefillin. But of course, if he was placed Begufan in the sense of arayas, he as well will not have a chance to enter Elam Haba either. In that case, then you can understand our Gemara. And Tosfos here, because the Gemara over here said that somebody has an affair. Tosfos explaining that he didn't do tshuva, so he's going to be condemned to a life in Gehenna. He's not going to be getting out of Gehenna. Presumably, again, like we just saying from the Rosh Hashanah, that's going to get the 12 months of Gehenna, and then that's it. Because whatever is left is going to be sort of wiped away. So that is how I just wanted to open up how severe arayas is in terms of the punishment. The thing that is mind-boggling in this Gemara is that while it's not Rava, if you look later on, the Gemara says, which we mentioned in the previous year on Dalan Mabez, that Chama Bar Chanina said that somebody who's a Gasei Ruach is Ki'ilu Baal Kol HaRayis. Like somebody not just having the Eshes Ish. He was Baal all HaRayis. That is essentially saying that somebody who's a Gasei Ruach, with an ego, is guilty of the worst sins, kind of sense that you can never leave Gehenna. And that seems to be sort of trying to get us to appreciate the severity of it. For all practical intents and purposes, it would be very, very challenging to imagine somebody keeps Kol Terakula and he has a bit of an ego. If such a person's going to be considered like this, that seems a bit of a step too far. All right, so Sotah Gemara. We are now in the last line of Dalet Mabez. Says the Gemara, Kasha Leili Rabbi Yochanan. So this is a question for Rabbi Yochanan, the last Gemara that we just did, trying to explain what that means in the pasuk. Yad liyad lo yenake, hand to hand, not be spared. So he said that we're talking about a Gatsa Ruach, that even if a person gave priority to the Baruch Shalom, nevertheless, that person would not be spared. Medina Shal Gehenim. Rashil didn't love that because he says that it's not somebody who's crediting the Baruch Shalom with creating the world, but rather he said the Yad Liyad is mashma more of somebody who, like Moshe Rabbeinu, received the Torah as it were from the Yad of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So saying even if somebody that was so into Torah, but was as though he accepted the Torah like Moshe Rabbeinu, but he had an ego, he's not going to be spared from Medina Shal Gehenna. Now the Gemara says Rabbi Yochanan doesn't love this because he says, what do you mean Yad Liyad? It sounds like it's hand to hand, not hand from a hand. If it was talking about the Rebbeinu Shalom, they should have said Yad Miyad, not Yad Liyad. So therefore, says the Gemara Rabbi Yochanan his own pshat to explain what does it mean. Somebody who's Yad Liyad, Lo Yinakev, Somebody who gave something from hand to hand, he won't be spared. What do we mean? Says the Gemara, Kashli, Rabbi Yochanan Hayli Yad Miyad Mebayale. Right? It should have said Yad Miyad Elam. Rabbi Yochanan returning the page not the Hayam. Aleph. Pilu Oisat stuck up the Seiser. Even if somebody did stuck up this Seiser, he gave Matam a Seiser. Dichsiv Matam a Seiser. Yichape Af. That Pasuk tells us to Mishlei that somebody who gives tzedakah privately, that pacifies the anger, that tones it down. So you would think such a person here, this egotistical person who is at the same time that he is egotistical, is nevertheless giving him atam sir. So you think maybe he will be spared? No. He will not be spared from the initial Gehenim, and that's the Yad Liyad. He's hand to hand, meaning he's giving charity from one hand to the next. So I was wondering, what is the reason Matam Meseser is compared? You would think that Matam Meseser, that's something that's going to make somebody's egotistical, somebody's a Gasir Ruach is going to be spared from the initial Gehenim. So I was wondering if the happening of the Gemara is that somebody who's giving Matam Meseser is against the definition of a Gasir Ruach. Right, by definition, people who are giving matam meseser are people who are not such gasir ruach. So maybe we're intimating that this person maybe he did a shtik l'tshuva, something. Maybe he wasn't totally doing tshuva, but something. So he was willing to mechni himself that he's giving a nice charity, but he's not going to have his name on the wall. He's not going to have his name be out there. Nevertheless, lo yanake, he's not going to be spared medina shel gehenim. This is Rabbi Yochanan's understanding. So now the more wants to explore. How do you know that there is actually a law against being a gasir ruach? Where's the warning? Where's the azhara to the gasir ruach? Amarav Amar Seiri Shimu v'Azinu Al Tigbo. The pasuk tells us that we should listen up and we shouldn't be raising ourselves up. We shouldn't be egotistical. So this is the azhara that a person shouldn't be. Nachma Yitzchak says the parsha we learned today, Parsha Eikev. The pasuk tells us you're going to be haughty, right? The whole parsha of Keichi v'Yitzim is in Parsha Eikev. That parsha opens up by Moshe Rabbeinu saying you're going to become haughty. Your hearts are going to be lifted up. And you have to forget God. And the warning. As Yishamalach over there, Moshe Rabbeinu says, don't forget God. So that's the Azhar. It's a bit of a question on this Gemara, why Rava, the name of Zeiri, who's talking about the Azhara, to not be a Gasir Ruach, bringing down a pasuk from Yirmiyah, is being quoted before the pasuk in the Torah, in Parsha Eikev. Not 100% clear why. All right, so let's continue the Gemara. So, according to Nachma Yitzchak, they learn out from Parshas Eikev. We can say Rabbi Oven, Amar Rabbi Lo. This can go like Rabbi Oven, the name Rabbi Lo. The Amar Oven, Amar Lo. Kalmar Shneim Yishomer. Pen ve'al Einoi Ela B'Lo Yisasa. Wherever it says these things of Yishomer, pen or al, these are indeed known as a Lo Yisasa. So over there, the pasuk says. Excuse me. Over there, the Gemara says that Yishomer, right, which is a loisasa, that you should not be forgetting the Rebbeinu Shalom, since it's associated or it's juxtaposed with Ramla Babecha becoming haughty. So you don't forget God in the sense of being too haughty and therefore forgetting God. There's actually no lav in the Torah that says do not be haughty. But that is fundamental, nevertheless, that it is one of those types of deis that a person needs to be adhering to, because it will lead to many other infractions, to many other averis. Continues the Gemara. Darash Ravira, Zimnan Amlam Shmeder Abasi, Zimnan Amlam Shmeder Abami. As I mentioned already before, when Dalan obeys, that this is presumed because Rami and Ravasi taught together. They were in the same yeshiva there in Tver. Although look at the Gemara in Dalan obeys, you'll see that it mentioned Ravami and then Ravasi, which is the normal way we see it in Shas, whereas over here, It mentions Rav Asi, and then it mentions Rav Ami. Not again sure as to why that is. So what did they darshan? Adam sheyesh b'gas haruach l'seif mismayit. Somebody who's an egotistical person, somebody who is very haughty. In the end, they're going to be mismayit. In the end, they're going to be knocked down from their chashivas, and they're going to be knocked down from their perch. Shneimar, the pasuk tells us, "Reimei me'at." Right, the reimu, the ones that are high, right, are going to be knocked down. They're going to be made small. They're going to be made mismayit. Maybe you're going to say that they're going to remain in the world. Says the Gemara, look at the next words there in the pasuk. They're in Eiv, Remem At, and they're not here. Right? So in other words, they're going to get knocked down from their high haughty perch. They're going to be brought down low, and they will not be anymore in the world. But if they go back, meaning they do tshuva, if they in fact turn it around and they become an anav, so then in that situation they will be nesaf bismana. They'll be taken away in the proper time, like Avram Avinu. Again, as the pasuk there continues, in Eiv Shnemar, v'homchu kichol yik pitzon. Over there, the pasuk says that if they become mamish an anav, then their lifespan will be extended, and the Gemara is focusing on the fact that it says kechol, that it'll be like the ones who are called chol. So if you look at Rashi, Rashi talks about Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, who are all have the word chol associated with them. So, for example, by Avram it says Bakol, Avram, Hashem was berech es Avram Bakol. By Yitzchak it said V'ochal mikol term tavoy v'avarachenu. By Yaakov it says Chichanani Elohim v'chiyesh lichol. So in all these situations, you see that these are, the others are associated with the word kol. So we're saying that if somebody came lower down, if he turned himself around and became a big anav, so then kichol yichbetz, right? Then it's going to be gathered up like the ones who are the kol. Who are those? The others. Says the Gemara, Avram Yitzchak Yaakov the Sivbu Bako Miko Kol. It says over there, Bako by Avram, Miko by Yitzchak, and Kol by Yaakov Avinu. So what we're effectively saying is that just because you have a trait of gas ruach, just because you've lived part of your life as an egotistical person, it doesn't mean that's the end. It's possible to turn it around. It's possible to become better. But if somebody does not, then they will die early. Then they will not live out their fullness of the years. It says the Marvim Lav, and if not, then they will wither like the shibolas, like the sheaves. Right, so like the person will be, brought in before the end of his days. So the Gemara wants to say now a drush on the pasuk over here. What does it mean? So we understand that if shibolas, a stalk, the sheaf, it has a top. What do you mean the head of the sheaf? What exactly does this mean? That you're saying that it's going to wither, that this guy is going to die if he doesn't turn it around? So the more explains, my ucharosh shibolas. What does it mean? The head of this stalk, the head of this. What exactly is it referring to? So the Gemara says, Rav Huna v'Rav Chizdos machlokes v'achad amar ki sasa d'shibalto. So one says, let's look at Rashi. Rashi says, Gavoya shel shibolas, shekorin is zokin hashibolas. The top part of the sheaf is like a little beard. It's like wispy. That's what this is referring to. The charamek is shibolas atzma. One says it refers to the actual, sheaf, the actual husk, the actual thing itself. So Says the Gemara, Bishlam Madam Kisas Shad Shibal. It makes sense according to Madam who says that it's like the top of part of it, because it's not the sheave, the top of the sheave, it's the topmost part of it. That's why it says the Rosh Shibalas. But according to the Madam Amar, right, Mishnah Madam Kisas Shad Shibal Taino the Sivuch Rosh Shibalas. El Madam Ki Shubal Ta'atzma Mai. According to the Madam who says that it refers to the Shibalas itself, to the husk itself. So Mayur Shibalas, then what are you referring to the top of that? So on that the Gemara says, Rav Asim Chintana de Rishma Mashlam Shenifnas Atech Sodeu, Gavaya Gavaya Humalaket. A person comes into his field, he generally is going to come along and harvest the things that he's going to see first, the tallest thing. So the person that is the big ego, he's sort of making himself out that he's above his friends. So that person is going to be, gathered in first. So whichever one you say, the kisisad, the shibalta, or the shibalta atzma, it doesn't make a difference. The point is that the things that stick out above others, they are noticed first, and for the negative. More now darshan to pasuk in Yeshaya. The Gemara says, "Daga u'shval ruach." The person who's very humble, he's low, he's not a haughty spirit. So the pasuk says that Hakadosh Baruch Hu l'hakes ruach shvolim l'hakes leitnim. Hashem takes care of such people. Shafuna Rav Chizda, again another machlokes Shafuna Rav Chizda. Chad Amar iti daka v'chad Amar nias hadaka. So you have a machlokes here in the Gemara. One says iti daka. What does iti daka means? Ani magbi hoy, says Rashi, I am going to lift him up. Ad sheshechen etzli. Meaning, there's two ways when you have somebody who's low. You can either lift him up, so now he's high with you, or you can go down low and be with them. So Aniya Sadaka, Rashi is explaining that what that means is that I'm going to lower the Shekhinah, as it were, to that person. But Iti Daka means I'm going to lift him up until he comes to reside next to me. So the Gemara says, it makes sense to say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as it were, goes down to live with those that are the humble, the downtrodden, rather than say that Hashem necessarily lifts them up. Because Hashem abandoned all the mountains, and Sinai was not, everyone knows, was not a major mountain. It was a small hill, or bigger mountains. Nevertheless, Hashem rested His Shekhinah on Sinai. That is to say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu took the Shekhinah and brought it down. It didn't make Har Sinai into some huge mountain. So that's a raya. Then instead of saying Iti Daka, we say Niyas Hadaka. Instead of saying that Hashem lifts up the lowly to be now on the high, Hashem rather, as it were, lowers the Shekhinah down to be with them in their downtrodden state. Rav Yosef, a person should always learn. Midas Kaina, we learned today the mitzvah halachta b'drachav, the mitzvah day. One of the mitzvahs, the mitzvahs count. You have to go in Hashem's way in everything that you do. So Rabbi Yosef is saying that the same way HaKadosh Baruch Hu is, as it were, is doing in a humble way, so too that's true with regards to us. Rabbi Yosef, Midas, a person has to learn from the Rebbeinu Shalom HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yachal Har Mugvayis V'Ishu Shekhinah like Sinai Hashem left all the mountains and was masters of the Shekhinah on our Sinai. And in my Gemara, it's put in the parentheses, but it's a similar idea. And Yechol Ilonis Teves Ish Shchinasif Sneh. And the Moshe Rabbeinu's first introduction to the Rebbeinu Shalom came by the sneh. The sneh, of course, was a lowly bush. It wasn't a big tree. If Hashem could have done the same thing by a big tree, the same idea. Again, that Hashem doesn't necessarily lift up the poor and the downtrodden to make them huge. Rather, he's machniah the Shekhinah, as it were, whatever that means, to be able to go to that smaller level. Yes, Zoti Marmar Belezer called him Sheish Begas Rach. Ro'oi legoide kashera. Person who is the Gasta Ruach, it's Ro'i to beat them up, right? To knock them down like an Ashera. An Ashera is for Avodah Zarah, right? We're going to have that in the coming parshas here in the Varm now. So the pasuk tells us that Asherim tisrafum ba'esh. You have to knock down Yibaratim Hashemam, Yitakas Hashemayim. You cannot have an Ashera. Or comparing somebody who's a Gasta Ruach like mamish, like being used for idol worship. Right? It says in Pasuk and Yeshaya that those that are egotistical, they are to be cut down. So you see a juxtaposition of the word of geduim, of knocking down with Asher, with the Geshkas. Somebody's a Gasa Ruach, he's not going to wake up. Right? If somebody's a Gasa Ruach, he's not going to have Gasa Mason. Obviously, this now goes back to the Gemara that we opened up with on Dal and Beis, that we were saying that somebody who's the Gasa Ruach, he's boil all rise, and we know that somebody didn't do tshuva, they are potentially going to be liable to being Ganim, whether Ganim forever, Ganim for 12 months, we already discussed in the beginning of this year, but fundamentally, they're not going to be able to get the advantage of Tchias Mason. So that's what we're saying over here. They're not going to wake up by Tchias Mason. Shneimar Akitu Rananu Sheichne Afar. Pasuk says that the ones who are Sheichne Afar, residing in the dirt, they should get up, they should sing. Says the Gemara, it doesn't say those that are residing in the dirt, meaning the normal you would expect it to say for people who are dead. It doesn't say Sheikh Afar, those that are residing in the ground. It says Sheikh Afar. What does that mean? Read it as, instead of reading it Sheikh Afar, read it as Shechine Afar. Right? So, somebody became a friend with the Afar in his days, meaning he was a very humble person. He was friends with the dirt because he was so lowly. Such a person, he is going to have Tchias HaMesim. But the Sheikh, if people just reside in the dirt, they don't necessarily going to have Tchias HaMesim. Tais here points out that, based upon what we're saying, that somebody's a Gasa Ruach is never going to be able to have Tchias HaMesim. And why did we mention that in Mishnah and Chelik and Sanhedrin? We talked about the people with no Chel Alam Haba. Shouldn't we consider such a person there as well? So again, as I mentioned, while this entire Gemara here teaches the severity of a Gasa Ruach, it certainly is not the case. Someone who's an egotistical person, but he managed to keep Kol Tarikula, that he's going to Gehenna forever, 12 months, whatever, he's not getting out ever. No. But the likelihood is that it's very hard to keep 613 mitzvahs when somebody is a Gasa Ruach. It's going to be that kind of a trait, that kind of a inclination in a person is going to lead to other avers. And for that, other person will be punished for. And this is fundamental because there is no trait that's inherently good or bad. We'll see more about this. It's really ultimately how it's utilized. When it comes to Kinnas Seif from Talmid Chachma, that's acceptable. It's lauded. It's considered a good thing. And while it's true that Akina Vatava covers Machinas Adam and Alam, but certainly certain elements of Kina help drive the world, especially when it comes to spiritual matters. Yeah, continues the Gemara. So Amar Blaza Kol Adam Sheish Begasa Rach Shchina Miyalela Salav. Anybody who's a mamish egotistical person, the Shchina, as it were, is crying over him. Shnem Avigavaya Mimerchak Yoda. Right? Somebody who's somebody who's a big ego. So the Rashi notes the ratio of the pasuk is Kiram Hashem. Hashem is high. Ushafal Yirah, and he sees the lowly. והגבוה ממרחק מקודם שטוב אל הפרנס יום רב ידע. What the shchita is misainenes and mishtaberes alav. The shchita is crying over such a person because, and that is the lashon over here of yodam. It's the lashon of shever. So in other words, the somebody who's very high and mighty, very haughty, the gavaya mimerchak yodah is it's a lashon of shever. It's a lashon of crying. It's a lashon of broken. Because of the fact that he's too high, he's too haughty, Hashem, as it were, is saying nebuch about this person. Darsh Rav Avira v'Yitema Rabbi Elazar. Let's see that the deeds of the Rebbeinu Shalom are not like humans. Midas Basar Adam, a human being, Gavaya, Re'es HaGavaya. Somebody who's haughty sees other haughty people. But most holy people, they don't focus on the low people. But the meaning of Hashem is not like that. Hashem is high, but he sees the low. He sees the downtrodden. He sees the poor and the oppressed. Yeah. Min matzah mina is what we normally say. The gavaya, those who are high, they want to hang out with the high people. They're not interested in hanging out with the low. Hakadosh Baruch Hu is the opposite. He seeks out being with the lowly. And what's the source of that? Shneimar Kiram Hashem v'shafal yirah. Hashem is high, but he sees the lowly. Amar Rav Chizda v'Yitema Ukva ka'olam sheish begas harach. Amar Hakadosh Baruch Hu ein ani v'hu yichon l'ado ba'olam. That the Gemara Rav Chizda is saying, Amar Ukva is saying that anybody who has from the Gasei Ruach, is from the big ego people, Hashem saying, I can't reside in the world with him. Like the world's too small for him and me. Shenamar, as the pasuk says, Miloshnim Aseser, Re'ehu Oisoi Atzmas, Gava Einayim Ruchav Levav, Oisoi Leuchal. So I'll take your Oisoi Ela Itoi, Leuchal. Right? He's not Hashem, as it were, saying that he cannot reside with such a person who is having a very big ego. Now, on this Gemara is essentially somebody who's a gavay naim rechav leva. I say leuchal, so don't read it. I say that I can't be with him. Ela ita, read it. I can't be with him. So I'm not sure that it's necessarily where I see the real change between Isai and Itai. Either way, Hashem is saying I can't be with such a person. Yeah. But there are those who understand this pasuk of Milshani B'Seiser from the Lashon Hara. Somebody who's speaking in the private, doing inappropriate things in terms of speech, that's a reference to Lashon Hara. So, so that's a reference to the Lashon Hara. And if that's a reference to Lashon Hara, then they're not so much talking about the Gavaya Lev, but those that are talking negatively about other people. Fine. Amar Alexandri Kolam Sheish Begasta Ruach Afilu Ruach Kimo Echartami. So Alexandri says that anybody who has Gasta Ruach, anybody who's egotistical, Afilu Ruach Kimo, even a small wind can blow him up and knock him down. Ne'emar Parasham Kiyam Nigrash. The Rishayim are going to be pushed away like the sea, the same way the sea throws, sorts of refuse and the like, pushes it onto the shore. So the person will be pushed. Mayam sheish b'kamar vias ruach kimar chartoi, barak yam, which has lots of reviyas. Nevertheless, a small wind, can come along and move the water. So Adam Shia Ain by El Revius Achas, a person who has only within himself only one Revius Achas Kam V'Kamo, that a small wind can blow him up. This is the nice thing more in Shabbos Talmud Aleph. The Gemara also says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, "I put a revius of blood in a person." So as the Messiah, this Gemara is one of those Gemaras that are problematic in terms of the modern science. A revius is less than a liter, significantly less than a liter, and we know that a person has somewhere between 4.5 to 6.5 liters of blood in their body. So potentially something like 30 times more than a revius of blood in their body. And we're saying over in this Gemara that a person has a revius of blood. So I think you can answer this issue again without, you could always say that it's science. And the rabbi said, no, the science is only the science of their day, but we don't have to do that over here because Taisus over here brings down the Rabbeinu Chanano. And we're only talking about the dam that's around the heart. So that would obviously be a much smaller amount of blood. So then it would make very well sense why we would only say that it's a revius of blood. Would that also answer the Gemara in Shabbos? I don't think so. So when we get to Shabbos, we'll have to explain over there. It is the Rav Chia bar Ashi Amarav. Rav Chia bar Ashi quoted Rav and saying, person has to have an eighth of an ego. An eighth of an eighth. What's that? I think that's like 1/64th or something like that, right? So Rav Huda Brady Rav Yeshua Ma'achulei Kisisa L'Shibolta. And Rav Huda Brady Rav Yeshua says that it's going to sort of drown him like the husk, like the top of the sheep. So according to Rav Chia bar Ashi, it's clear that Talmud Chacham has to have a little bit of an ego, not a lot, but 1/8 of an eighth. Amar Rava b'sham to this, b'sham to the last. Rava says somebody who has an ego, he's going to be worthy of nidui. He's going to be worthy of being put into nidui. And if he doesn't have an ego, he's also going to be worthy of putting into nidui. Why? Because then, as Rashi says, no one's going to be listening to him. His tzibur is not going to be caring about what he has to say. If he has no ego, he doesn't stand up for himself at all. Yeah. So Rav Nachman Yitzchak, lo minov, lo miktsasa. Rav Nachman Yitzchak disagrees with Chia bar Ashi, and he says a person should not have any ego whatsoever, not even a little bit. Why? Mizuta desivei teyavas Hashem kol goyim. Is it nothing to you that it says in pasuk that it's a toyevel? Anybody has a haughty heart? So you tell me, oh, but a small haughty heart, that's okay? No, any haughty heart is not okay. So over here we have a bit of an interesting thing to mention. It's clearly the machlokes here in the Gemara. The Rabbin of his days talks about various days that everybody has, and generally says the person has to be the midah hamamutza. You have to be the middle of the road. What does it mean, the middle of the road? It means that take a typical day, take a typical trait, and try to figure out where the middle is. If you're, say, somebody who is a lazy person, so then work on yourself, go to the kata akar, make yourself crazy on the other side, so that you become the regular, normal, middle person. Any sort of traits, when somebody's a jealous person, make yourself crazy on the other side to be so not jealous, and then eventually you should come back to the middle. But when it comes to ego, when it comes to somebody who's arrogant, the rabbi writes, really, you're not supposed to be in the middle. Really, you should be because of achron. You should be on the other side. Be a total shval ruach. The rabbi acknowledges that somebody who is in the midah beinus when it comes to ego. So the rabbi says that he is a chacham and he is an anav. But somebody who is a midah of be a slave, somebody whose ego is so beaten down that he essentially goes to kata achar and he goes to the other side totally. So such a person is going to be considered a chassid, and that's why Rambam writes that Moshe ben Dansi was an anav. Says anav ma'od mikala adam hashal pnei adam. He wasn't just a regular anav; he was a chassid, and so therefore For the Rambam, it's clear that the Mida Habeinin is the Mida Hamutza, which is sort of being in between. Really, it's not ideal when it comes to arrogance. And arrogance, a person should really try strive for chasidus. But I assume that and the Rambam brings that argument over here. He only brings that one part of it. The Rava says b'shamta the isbei. The Rambam doesn't bring down b'shamta the lesbei. That if you don't have an ego, that you're also going to be in problem. You also deserve nidui. So I think it's clear that even Moshe Rabbeinu was not of maybe called Adam Hashem. You never find any aspect of ego when it comes to Moshe Rabbeinu. He's a total pass-through. He's the Anav Ma'id Mikol Ad. He's the total pass-through. He's a conduit for the Rebbeinu Shalom to give the Torah because of the fact that his ego was so diminished that it could really serve as a total pass-through for the Rebbeinu Shalom. Nevertheless, we do find that Moshe got angry by Kairach, and he asked Hashem not to listen to Kairach. And he says over there, so that was the one time you see even a little bit of something of Moshe Rabbeinu that he got upset. Meaning, other times he got upset. He got upset on behalf of what the Bereshit, on behalf of what the Jewish people were doing. But it wasn't personal. Here it was the one time when Moshe Rabbeinu stickle something. You accuse me of, nepotism, of pointing out all the things, but it has no basis. The Moshe Rabbeinu, you see a stickle of shemens. So again, I go back to the theme. We're going to hear a whole Gemara about the Gasei Ruach, how terrible it is, and it's certainly terrible. But it is one of those days that, if used appropriately, if harnessed correctly, then it could really increase somebody's learning. So it's not inherently evil, even though it is very dangerous to be mishtamish with it. So that person, most people should usually be working on trying to diminish their ego rather than saying, oh, they're just having a certain bit. How do you know a certain bit is going to really be a shminis of a shminis? It's not easy to manage that. Then is the Gemara, the last Gemara here on Daled Amud Aleph. Says the Gemara, Amar Chinzki ain't tefillos sh'on mishmas elam kein mesim liba kibasar. A person's tefillos are not going to be heard unless he makes his heart like flesh. Shneimar vayami dechodesh bechodesh yavoy kol basar l'shtachavos. Right, obviously the shtachavos is tefillah. When we say yavoy kol basar, you have to have a leiv basar. You have to be very human. You come to daven, then Hashem is going to listen to you. But if a person's going to be egotistical, then their tefillos are not going to be heard. Amar Zera Basar Ksivbei. Over here it's written Basar V'nirpa Adam, right? Loik Ksivbei V'nirpa, right? So it doesn't say over here, as Rashi notes, that Basar Ksivbei V'nirpa Basar by Teras. The Basar of the Basar Kiyah by Ba'irishchin V'nirpa. A person, a flesh that's going to have some sort of a malady, so they could be healed. But when it says Adam Kiyah Ba'ir and Negat Teras, Kisiyah Adam like Sibuchaminav and Nirpa over there, when it talks about Adam, it doesn't say that he's going to be healed. So why not? That teaches us Shemishu Rach V'Anav Kibasar Karvlis Rampes Miyusurin Abono. Somebody who's a basar, somebody's flesh, is more likely to be healed from the Teras. So that's why Zera is bringing up further proof to this notion that Chizki is saying that a person's tefillos are not going to be heard unless he makes his heart like a heart of flesh. So the proof of that, Zera wants to say, by Basar it says Venirpa, it says that a person will be healed. But by Adam it says Adam Kiyah Barbitsar, it doesn't say over there like Venirpa. There it doesn't say he'll be healed. It doesn't say. Adam, what does the word Adam stand for? Efer, Dam, and Mara. Right? The word Adam can be seen as an acronym for a person having been made of dirt, blood, and Mara is like sort of the bile that comes out from the liver. Meaning, that's why we call a person Adam. But it shouldn't be, as Rashi says, don't be so egotistical. What are you? You're an Adam. You're full of what? Afar, dam, and mar. That's it. So why are you so excited? Yeah. Continues the Gemara. Um, Basar. What is the word basar? Uh, consists of busha, surucha, rima. Right. Basar is very humbling. It's busha is their acronym for embarrassment. Surucha is, and rima is like when things spoil, they become sort of wormy and gross, and that's the basar. It's a very very low level. Yeah, ikid ami. Those that want to say on this idea, ikid ami shoel the siv b'shin, right? That um, the word from shoel, which is written with a shin, it could be, yeah. So we'll have to stop over here. Continue the thing on the next the next on the next on the next Amud Yomi page.